Well, what's up, Recovery Soul Food Warriors? You're in for a huge, eye-opening, heart-enhancing, God-loving treat tonight with author Joe Potosi, the author of When the Dust Settled, a book that is so remarkable, and it just exposes, well, it takes you through the journey of Joe's life through childhood neglect, childhood abuse, and it's just a testimony to a spirit in which, man, never give up and keep trying. And so there's going to be so many amazing things that's going to come through this meeting. I'm super grateful to have this man in my midst now. You know, anybody that comes on my show, guys, they don't get rid of me easy. God keeps bringing me these amazing friendships with these amazing connections with these amazing human beings. And this guy is no different. Joe Potosi, welcome to Recovery Soul Food. And thank you so much for being here, man.
Lona, thank you so very much for this opportunity. I'm excited to speak with you. And I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate your platform to educate the people, your listeners and whoever else tunes in, because you're making a difference in the world in which we live, man. So thank you.
Man, thank you. Thank you so much for saying that. And you are as well. I mean, I have been so just dumbfounded at just how much we truly share in common with this. It's so amazing so many times to look in the mirror of someone who has gone through a lot of the same things, and the themes are the same. The details might be a little different, but the themes are the same. And just how the abuse, how the neglect, how the feeling that the distrust of those you're entrusted to their care, just all of that in the book, how much it affects us and our belief systems, our deep-rooted feelings about ourselves. So I'm so looking forward to getting into that with you. And guys, we are live right now on Lona Curry on Facebook.com. We're also live on the Recovery Soul Food YouTube channel. If you guys are not already a subscriber, please head over to Recovery Soul Food on YouTube and like, subscribe, and share it out. I want this video right here to go farther than any other video I've ever done, because you know what? It's remarkable how many young people, how many people in recovery have gone through so many of these same things. And people need to see that you can heal from this. You can rise above it, and you can never, ever give up. So Joe, if you're ready, I'm ready. You guys, let's hit this intro and get into it with Joe Potosi of When the Dust Settled. When the Dust Settled, man. Again, thank you for being on the Recovery Soul Food Podcast. This is an absolute amazing treat for me. I bought the book a couple days ago. I bought it on Kindle. I want everybody to know that you can get Joe's book, When the Dust Settles, on Amazon. You can also get it on the Kindle app. Joe, is it available on Audible, or you tell me where it's available? I know those two places for sure.
It's available on Barnes & Noble's website.
Nice.
Xulon Press. That's XULON Press. And I have a website, joepotosi.com. You can go there, and I have the links to those three places on my website.
Perfect. I'm going to write that joepotosi.com right here in the comments so that, you know what, that's easy. You guys go there and pick this book up. It's a great read. Number one, it's a really great read. The way that it is constructed, the way that you have put the stories together, it's like you leave nothing out, and yet it's not too jumbled up. That's what I love about it. It tells the story in grand detail, and yet it's not jumbled up. It's like every word you used is purposed. And I was just really amazed by your writing talent, not to mention the story. So let's fill everyone in. We've got some beautiful people in the house. Let me say hey to Bonnie Blades from the North Pole. Thank you for being here. Yvonne, Bonnie Max, New York City. Thank you for being here with us. My best friend Anthony McCauley is in the house. I wish Anthony Brown was here. He better get his butt in here too. Anthony McCauley is also a fellow author and just a beautiful friend of mine. Jenna Ruth, Alicia Lee, Paula Folsom, Pam V. Man, my mom's here, so everybody's saying hey Joe, everybody's saying hey LC. So Joe, tell us about you. Tell us about When the Dust Settled. Talk to us for a little while about your story.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Lana. So my earliest memory, I was around the age of 3.5. We lived in a pretty dilapidated apartment in Rockford, Illinois. At this point in my life, I had a sister. She was like 13 months older than myself. And my mom was pregnant with my brother, Marty. And my father was on the scene at this point. And we were really poor. But the one thing that stood out to me about that time of my life was the love my father showered me with and my sister. He wasn't a perfect father. He liked to drink his beer. And him and my mother would get into arguments because he had as it turned out, he had a bad work history. But I felt loved, and I felt like I belonged. And I felt like they really genuinely cared about me. Okay, see you. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Be safe, man.
Love on those kids, man.
That's my 19-year-old son.
Wow. We're going to get to him. He's going to get talked about here tonight. We're going to get to him in a few minutes.
Yeah. So we had a oven, a stove. Every time my mother would open up the oven door, the door would kind of fall off, and the place was really dilapidated. And they applied to move into these housing projects, right? And we got accepted. These housing projects, Jane Addams was in the same neighborhood. It was only 2 or 3 years old. And for us, it was a step up, right?
Yeah.
And let's face the facts. People that live in the projects, they're kind of looked down on because of their, whatever.
Yeah.
But if you remember that TV show, The Jeffersons, moving on.
Yeah.
For us, right? But just before we moved into the projects, my mother had she had her third child, Marty. We moved into these projects, and within a couple of days, all the people in the neighborhood, all the adults started coming around, and my mom and dad would sit around drinking and playing cards. And before me and my sister knew it, we were taking care of the baby brother, brand new baby brother. And back in those days, we didn't have Pampers or diapers we have today. We had cloth diapers.
Yep, the cloth. Yeah.
Yeah, and you had to put pins through the cloth, and you had to wash the diapers out.
Yeah.
Once a week. And my mom would teach my sister, and then my sister would teach me how to feed the baby, how to change his diaper. And I so much wanted to be a part of his life and help out, right?
Yeah.
But when all this was going on, my mother and father continued to have these big arguments and disagreements and whatnot. And my father started staying away for days at a time. But there was one particular guy named Tyrone that was a constant fixture at our house. And my dad was gone for maybe 10 days. And I kept asking my mom, when's dad coming home? When's dad coming home? And she would get on me about that because she was always irritated, always mad.
Yeah.
We had little to no food, and it was my dad's fault. We didn't have much of anything, and everything was his fault. But I'll never forget this as long as I live. The day my dad came home. One of his friends brought him over. He went upstairs and he got his army duffel bag and he put his clothes in the bag and he left. And I ran after him, right? Because this man was my hero.
Yeah, that was big in the book, man. I could feel you. I could feel that pulling away, that what's happening moment in the book.
It was so hard, man. It really was. And yeah, I was only, they're close to being 4 years old, but taking care of a kid brother and fending for ourselves, we had to grow up really fast, right?
Yeah.
So that same day, later that day, so my dad went out the front door. This guy, Tyrone, came in the back door.
Wow.
And the thing is, he came in and he never left.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't mention this before, but so my mother had Marty, right? And then within 2 months of having Marty, she was pregnant again with my second brother, Greg. So she was pregnant while she was drinking all the time, smoking weed.
I was thinking that in the book when I was reading, I was thinking, wow, because she's having children and there's still a lot of addiction issues.
Yes.
Which still in the 70s, we didn't really know. I was thinking, I kept reminding myself, this is the 70s and we don't really know at this point how dangerous this is. And I remember that was one of the things I wanted to ask you about. Sorry for the interruption. Go ahead.
No, you're perfectly fine, sir. So what happened was Marty and Greg, my second brother, his name was Greg. He was born 11 months after Marty.
Wow.
And my mother would always say they're Irish twins. If you have children within a year of them,
mm-hmm.
They're called Irish twins. I don't know if that's factual or not, but that's what I was always told,
Yeah.
But the one thing, it shouldn't matter to any of us here tonight, especially in 2020.
Right.
But this was a big deal back in the 70s. You see, my mom's 4'11", small little white lady with 3 little kids, and my stepdad was a black man, 6'5", and he got to be the size of 350 pounds.
Wow.
And I think the reason I'm bringing this up is because in the projects itself, it was like a melting pot. There was Hispanic people, black people, Asian people, and we just, over time, I created friendships, and we didn't care what you were. We were just kids, and we treat you the way we like to be treated.
Yeah.
Some of the people in my extended family in Dubuque, Iowa, where my mother and father are from originally, didn't care for black people. And they let it be known to my mom and my stepdad how much they didn't appreciate a black man being with my mom.
Mm-hmm.
But
so that was even more on top of what that was. More on top, more alienation there.
Yes,
for you guys.
Yes, and they didn't use nice words, of course.
I'm sure
you can imagine some of the language.
Absolutely.
Always threatening to blow my stepdad's head off. And always threatening to meet him at the bridge on the Mississippi River.
Violence.
Kill him. And
violence.
My stepdad, in turn, would take out his frustration on us. Let me explain. I mentioned before how my mom and dad would get into arguments. And prior to my dad leaving for good, they got into a fist fight. But it was all one-sided. My mother was attacking my father, and he just covered up. He just tried to protect himself, And she pummeled him, right? And I felt so bad for my dad, I mean, I love my mom, and I know my dad loved my mom. And apparently, I guess that's why he didn't fight her back. Well, that's why he didn't grab her. He just tried to cover up. But there was a shift. My stepfather and mother would get drunk, get high, and my stepfather would beat my mom.
Yeah, that was a big thing in the book.
Yeah. Over the years, he broke her jaw, broke her collarbone, ripped her face open. And she, in turn, would take out her frustration and her anger toward me and my sister. You see,
Yeah.
everything went from being my father's fault to my fault. Me and
Your
my
fault.
yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
I had a huge target on my back.
No doubt.
So after Tyrone was around for a while, my mom started working second shift. My stepdad did not work, but he sure had enough money to get weed. And every day he drank a fifth, not a quart, but a fifth of E&J brandy. And we would go without, you know. We didn't have much food, and fried bologna sandwiches became like prime rib for us,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And on the extremely, extremely rare occasions we got to go to like Jerry's Hamburgers or McDonald's, it was like we felt like on top of the world, right? So this cycle of abuse with my stepfather beating my mother, and then she in turn would beat us, it just escalated to the point that what my stepdad would do is my mom would be at work, and my stepdad would send me and my sister and my two brothers down to the basement. And he had put a different doorknob on the door so he can lock it.
Mm.
And we'd be locked down there. There was no bathroom down there. All we had was a little black and white TV. And me and my sister were, had to take care of our brothers.
Y'all were raising the kids. Y'all were raising the kids.
Exactly right. And this apartment we lived in was only a 2-bedroom. And my stepdad started saying he's going to move us out of the projects because of the stigma, living in the projects and the shame of it all or whatever. I'm going to get y'all out of the projects. You wait and see. We're getting out of these projects. I'm like, whatever.
Yeah.
How about you start treating us like humans for a change? Treat my mom like the way she deserves. And
yeah, like we'll live anywhere. We'll keep living here if we could feel safe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So fast forward a little bit. My sister's in school. I'm in school now. In first grade, I still had just the two younger brothers at this point. I would meet up with some of the other kids in the neighborhood and we'd walk to school together. But I quickly discovered by being in school, I was safe. They weren't going to lock me in a basement or in some room. They weren't going to berate me, call me names. And, up until this point, a pattern started with my mother. And that was, you are your father's son. You are a piece of crap. You're worthless. You're not good.
The names just the names I noticed in the book, the moron and dumbass and just those types of names. I want to talk just a quick, because the first thing that took my breath away. The first thing I said to my wife when I was reading this is the next chapter said I was starting the 3rd grade. Now, the way that this story was going down and the thoughts that were already going through your head were the thoughts and the responsibilities of a grown-up. And it just floored me to the point that I had to put the tablet down for a minute, and I was like, the 3rd grade. The 3rd grade. Like, this is 7, 8, we're 8. We're working on 9 years old at this time in the 3rd grade, and you and your sister are raising kids with nothing because you don't have the luxuries of the adult. You can't go get food. You're having to go through things with barely anything, and you're also going through the stress. And I think that this is very vital for us to bring up, because so many times we forget to talk about the stress in an abusive situation of thinking that your mom is going to die. Now, I went through this myself. It was me and my mom. We were in a very abusive marriage, and she was very small, like your mom. My mom was very small, I think 5 foot, barely 100 pounds at the time. My stepdad was, I think over 6 foot. At least he looked like a monster to me. And the same with the alcoholism. And what I related to in the book is you were able to tell the mood and know what kind of night it was going to be from the moment you walked in the door. That's how perceptive kids are. It's like we think kids aren't paying attention, but you could tell the atmosphere by the look on people's faces, by the tones of the voices, and the fear begins at that moment when you know this is going to be one of those nights. And seeing your mom or your parent be abused like that is very scary, because as a child, again, you're still dealing with a child's mind and you don't know if he's going to stop this time. And that fear is, am I going to be left alone here? And that is a real fear that carries years of internalized trauma, just fear that nobody that hasn't gone through it doesn't understand. And I want to say to everybody here tonight that this is one of the biggest reasons that I wanted Joe to come here on our show, because so many of us in active addiction, in recovery, are dealing with these same things that have gone on in our lives that we may not think about on a daily basis, but that is affecting almost every decision you make, almost every thought that you think. And I wanted to expose this, because here's Anthony Brown in the house. I wanted to expose this and let this story be heard and have Joe tell it, because there's something that was so amazing to me about Joe during this entire time. And this book is you need to get this book, guys. You got to get it, because you got to read these stories. We'll never have time for you to hear all these stories. But Joe walked around with a target on his back every day. And I know what that feels like. And so many of you out there know what that feels like too. I keep seeing comments, Joe. I can totally relate to all of this. This sounds like my story. I mean, this is why this community is vital to hear this. Joe had an attitude through this whole thing where he just kept trying to do better, where he just never gave up and found strength in things like family. Him and his sister, you're going to get this book, and I'm telling you, you're going to fall just as in love with his sister as you do with Joe, because there's this teamwork that went into all of this. And Joe, I just wanted to stop there to be able to bring attention around to watching someone being abused many times is not even as easy as being abused yourself, because there's no control, there's fear, there's so many things wrapped into that. And I want people to really hear that your addiction, your disease is born in this time. And we can all draw so much strength from Joe's story, Joe's tenacity, Joe's never give up, because when you guys get this book, you're going to see what you're hearing right now and what you're going to continue to hear is just scratching the surface of all the time that Joe got his hopes up. They were let down. Joe, I related to that part in your story where Grace was going to adopt you. And I wrote this down in my notes. I have quite a page of notes here. The disappointment of having to make that choice when Grace was going to adopt you.
Yeah.
Do I leave my siblings? Do I save myself and have to leave my siblings? Do I go back? Where's the sacrifice there? And you were such a little boy. And I know what that feels like, of making that choice of saving what's left of me and having to leave behind. But of course, I was 14, 15 years old at that time. You were very young. So that was a huge disappointment in your life. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I know we were going there. Catch us up real quick and then tell us about that, because I want to hear how you kept yourself from being so dang angry.
Okay.
Because I want to know that. I want to know that.
Before I share that, I shared with you how my stepdad would beat my mother.
Yes.
What I didn't share with you was how when me and my sister, we sensed something was going to happen. We knew, we just knew.
Yeah,
we were going to go off. We would we would grab our kid brothers and we would go hide, right? And of course, my kid brothers are crying because they don't understand. They just hear their mother screaming bloody murder. And I would shield them so they wouldn't see it, but they still heard it. And me and my sister would look on to make sure he wasn't coming after us next. In fact, we tried to run away out of the house a couple times with our kid brothers to get help, and he stopped us. But that was when the PTSD started. Of course, I didn't know that's what it was.
Right.
And it stayed with me for years and years. So in 3rd grade, I got involved with the after-school program at a local church. So between church and school, I felt normal to an extent. I would try to stay longer at church to help clean up so I wouldn't have to go home. And we all know about the bully on the block, the bully in the neighborhood. The bully I dealt with on a daily basis was my stepfather.
That's right.
In the projects, there was a lot of gangbangers. There was a lot of drugs going on, a lot of really hardcore dudes. But they are all afraid of my stepdad. Somebody said, well, how come somebody didn't turn him into social services? People don't realize in the projects, in this scenario, everyone was terrified of him, including the cops.
Yeah.
And so,
kind of our case too. Yeah.
And during all this time in my tender years, 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, I used to daydream as I walked to school or walk to the church that my dad would come around the next corner and he would save the day. He'd be like Superman. And he would come and set things right. He would take care of the bad guy, in this case, Tyrone, be reunited with my mother. And I could almost visualize him coming around the next corner, but it never happened. And so, because everything was my fault, every day, everything was my fault. And when I would inquire about my father, my stepdad would berate me and beat me for no reason because I was a thorn in his side. And I was a thorn in my mom's side. And they began to tell me how much they hated me and how they wanted to get rid of me, right? So since everything was my fault and I wanted my mom to like me again, to love me, right? That I got my first job in 3rd grade at a local restaurant, sweeping the parking lot. And the owner of the restaurant goes, kid, this isn't your responsibility. I said, oh, yes, it is. My stepdad doesn't provide for the family. My dad is out of the picture, and he never gave us a penny. He was gone.
He was an active addiction.
Yes, he was.
He was an active addiction.
Actually, I didn't know this, but he became a literal hobo. He would catch freight trains all over the Midwest, stay at the rescue missions in Denver, Milwaukee, Lincoln, Nebraska, Omaha, work for a day labor to make money to get drunk.
Yeah.
And then when we were allowed to go to Dubuque, Iowa each summer or thereabouts, somehow, some way, they would track my father down. He would come to Dubuque and I would be able to see him. So, at a certain point in time, I cried out to the school about what was going on. They failed us. I cried out to the church. They failed us. I cried out to my family. Like when I would go to Dubuque in the summer and I'd be at my grandmother's house and they would sit around the kitchen table and she would make me cookies and homemade pudding or whatever. And they would ask me what's going on. And I would tell them. I was like an open book.
Yeah.
But you know what they would do? They didn't call social services. They didn't call the cops. They would get on that phone and cuss out my dad and stepmom, my stepdad and mother.
And make it worse.
Home, I had a price to pay.
Yep. Yeah.
There's an unwritten rule. You don't put our business in the streets.
That's right. I
and
know
so,
that well.
Right. So this pattern continued. Now in 4th grade, I want to share a story with you that it's kind of graphic in nature. Lana, you know about it.
I do.
So up until this point, every parent-teacher conference, well, let me back up and say this. We did move out of that apartment right across the street to a bigger apartment, to a 4-bedroom. And by this point in my history, my mother had 2 sons to my stepdad, right? So now there's 6 kids. So the 4 of us were in school, and we would go to parent-teacher conferences, and my mother would always just rush through the process to get home because God knew she wasn't going to work. She wanted to go home and drink. But on one particular time in 4th grade, we got home from school. We had fried bologna sandwiches. My mom wanted to put on a good show. She had to get clean clothes on. This is the problem. I didn't have any clean underwear. So I put on my jeans and I go to zip the jeans up and I get my private part stuck in the zipper. We walk to the school and I'm in the back. I was in so much pain. And my mother, believe this or not, she took her sweet time putting on a show for the teachers, et cetera, et cetera. We get back home. She instructs me to take a bath. I go up there and, very gently, I try to unhook myself. Like I said, this zipper was stuck.
You've been hooked for hours now.
Yes.
You've been hooked for hours, contemplating, not wanting to say anything because you don't know what's going to happen, and you're praying you can take care of it by yourself. Oh, okay, keep going. I just had to say that.
I started stomping around kind of like in agony, and she came up there and was like, "What's going on, moron?" And I said, "I'm stuck." She goes, "What do you mean you're stuck?" And I kind of looked down, and she was, hitting her cigarette, taking big drags off her cigarette. And she goes, "Move." And I backed up, and she grabbed that zipper, not with compassion, not with tender loving care. She grabbed that zipper, and with like all the hatred she can muster, she pulled that zipper up and down. And I started bleeding like a stuck pig. You know what happened? No hospital, no doctor visit. I went to my bed with a rag. I had found a rag in the bathroom, and I put the rag on myself and just cried myself to sleep.
Wow.
So this was my life. And things with my stepfather never really changed. He was a drug dealer, and he was a menace to society. He was a menace in our house. And he ruled the roost. And at this point in my life, I felt like she was picking him over us. And around this time,
that's a big deal, Joe. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
That's a big feeling. That's a big thing to take in. I remember feeling that way as well. And that was very hard for me to understand. And so as a child, you internalize that and you say, I'm not good enough. We're not enough. We are, and as children, when we're processing these things, we're building our belief systems for life, which again is something that's so remarkable about you, Joe, is that you work through this stuff and that you don't carry this. And there's so many people just in this feed right now in this community that are right now hearing from you, and they are realizing, number one, they're not alone. Number two, they're able to see somebody that has, 2 people that have climbed out of this and are using it for a purpose, and that they're able to see that some of this makes sense. Some of the things I processed and built my life upon were in the mind of a child, and I can heal. I can come from this. So again, sorry to interrupt, but I got to pull those points in when I see them because there's so many things remarkable about you, Joe. I could go on for 2 hours about the remarkable parts of you.
Thank you, man.
Sorry, go ahead.
Little did I know, behind the scenes, my father had signed his rights to me away to his sister Grace. And my mother verbally agreed to allow me to be adopted by his sister because they wanted to get rid of me and everyone would have been happy. So I stayed that summer. I stayed with my Aunt Grace for a time, and her daughter, she has 3 daughters. She had 3 daughters. They got a bedroom all ready for me. They're all excited. I was excited. And it was like a huge transition, and it was so surreal, right? But then My Aunt Grace sat me down and said that essentially your mom backed out of the deal. And I was going back to Rockford, Illinois, what I call the trenches. I was going back to the hell on earth. And you asked me, how did I cope with that? How did I deal with that? It's real simple. You see, although my stepfather fathered two kids, and he was a piss poor example to all of us, he was there, but he wasn't there. And I was more of a father figure to his sons than he was. They emulated me, they talked like me, they acted like me. And I love my brothers, I love my sister. And so in my mind, I was thinking, you know what? I'm going to be reunited with my siblings, and in spite of everything else, I'm just going to love them and
Good.
be there for them. And a little kid shouldn't have to make those type of decisions. A little kid shouldn't be put in that situation, but I was, and it sucked. It really sucked. But because I love my kids so much, my kid brothers, when there was a few times where they would do something and the stepdad wasn't very happy about it, and I took the rap. I took the rap and I took the beating because I wanted to protect my brothers. Because it wasn't a typical swat on the butt with the belt. Oh no. My stepdad had a wooden paddle he drilled holes in, he liked to use, a cord from an iron he liked to use, and this 44-inch waist, 44-inch belt. And he wouldn't just hit you in the butt. He'll hit you all over your back, the back of your head. He'll throw you around. And I don't want my kid brothers to be subjected to that. On top of that, he would make you strip naked. And he'll let everybody come and watch.
Yeah.
He'll put
Yeah.
on a show. And so I just try to take the place of my real father. And I try to give my kid brothers some stability or some normalcy, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense.
And by this time, too, I like to say, Lana, is that, I mentioned church. We used to go to church on Sundays. We used to go to church on Wednesday nights. And people would share with me the story of Jesus Christ and what he did for all of mankind and how he loved me. And all I simply had to do was put my trust in him and what he did for me on the cross, and he rose again. But guess what, Lana? I couldn't trust my mother, my father, or my stepfather, and I see them every day.
Yeah.
I don't see God. I can't feel God.
Yeah.
How am I supposed to believe in this?
Yeah.
So it was a struggle, but
Yeah.
I still kept going to church because it was a release for me. It was an out. It was a way
Yes.
for me to get out of the house. And I know that might seem pathetic to some of you listeners, but that was my reality.
No, I think a lot of people understand that because back in those days, I remember we grew up poor. We lived in a trailer park, and the church bus would come through the trailer park. And it was that time where you could get away and you didn't have to worry about, am I going to breathe too loud? Am I going to walk too hard? Is my mom going to die tonight? Am I going to die tonight? Is someone going to try to attack my little sister? Am I going to have to step in the way of that? These are the things. So I think that a lot of people are going to really connect with that because that's real.
So believe it or not, my dad was still not around. In spite of the fact that he knew just how bad things were, the majority of my extended family stayed away. My stepfather and mother got us out of the projects, and we moved to the west side of Rockford. Ironically, it was behind another set of projects, right? But it was a house, like a grandfather house. But a house is not a home, Lana. A house is not a home.
No.
All the boys, we had our bedrooms in the basement. There was a toilet downstairs. It was like a rec room, the washer and dryer and all that. And that's where we spend the majority of our time. And he would keep us locked in the basement every day after school. When all the boys get home from school, he allowed us to grab like saltine crackers and some water. Once we all were in the basement, he'll lock that door. And the only time we were let up is for dinner, wash the dishes, take our baths, and down to the basement we were sent. And my mother would be working second shift, and my stepdad would be upstairs. My sister was upstairs. Her bedroom was across from my mom's and his. And the abuse continued. He continued to beat my mother. He continued to beat us for no apparent reason. And I got a paper route. I was in fifth grade by this point because I wanted to have my mother like me again. I wanted her to treat me like one of her kids, right? I got this paper out, and through the paper out in the winter months, I got shoveling jobs, and I'm only in fifth grade. I'm making all this money. I would go to the local drugstore and I buy my mom a coffee mug or a throw rug for her kitchen. I would buy my stepdad his favorite candy, and I was trying to buy their acceptance. At the time, I didn't know this, but I was trying to keep the peace, right?
Yeah.
But it was never enough. It was never enough. And I would give my mother the money. I'll hang on to some of it, but I'll give the majority to my mother. But because of the treatment my stepdad was dishing out toward my mother, myself, and my brother Greg, he had another target on his back. I quit the paper route. And this was how he dealt with that, my stepfather. One particular night, he was playing with a 38 caliber handgun, and
this is a hard one, guys. Hold on one second, Joe. This is a hard one. If it's not already hard enough, like this is a hard one, and we're gonna go a little long tonight because I wanna get this stuff out, but this is a hard one. So guys, hear this, because Joe, this made an impact on me. I wrote it down in my notes that this was one of the moments where I had to set it down for a minute and just again, it just reminded me of the resiliency of a child, the human spirit, and again, it just showed me who you are. Your character was apparent then. I can only imagine who you are today. So I just want to let you guys know that, Joe. Please continue.
Thank you. So it was on a Saturday night. One of the things I didn't mention before, I think is kind of paramount for us as a family. Growing up in the 70s, we were poorer than dirt. But one of the things that I clung to was music. Motown, The Temptations, Queens, Jackson 5, all these types of groups, because to me, it was relatable what they were singing about.
Yeah.
And it was in my heart. I woke up on a Saturday night and he was playing, I think it was Papa Was a Rolling Stone by The Temptations, I do believe. And the music was blaring. So I go upstairs, and what do I find? My stepdad is sitting at the kitchen table. He has all these newspapers spread out and is feverishly cleaning his 38 caliber handgun. I sheepishly asked him if he could turn the music down. He instructed me to have a seat. Now I'm really scared. I'm like, what's going on? There's something up. I know him,
Yeah.
And he comes back and he sits down. He goes back to working on his gun, and I'm staring at the ground. And he wore these really dark glasses. The lenses were really super dark. And he had to look really hard to see his eyes, And I looked up at him, and I looked at him, and I could see the little dots, And it kind of freaked me out. He goes, "Why did you quit the paper route?" I didn't have an answer. Like when you're in so much fear, your tongue tied.
And you can't speak.
Right. Your heart's going 1,000 miles an hour.
Yep.
And you're literally shaking.
Mm-hmm.
And he says to me, "Give me one reason why I shouldn't pull the trigger." Now, I heard him putting the bullets back in. I looked up and I seen he was putting bullets back in the gun. This is a revolver. I didn't know at the time he didn't put all 6 bullets in. I just knew he put bullets in it. He closed it. He pointed it at me and he pulled the trigger. Instantly, I peed my pants as I jumped up and I ran downstairs. And I went to the one place I knew he couldn't find me or get to me, and that was behind the furnace. And I was already walking on eggshells for years, right? What did I do to him or to her?
That's the question.
In such a way? What?
That's the questions we ask ourselves.
Right.
We pull that belief into ourselves that like it's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. And Joe, I want to, just in the essence of time, because that is a subject and a story that there's so many things inside of that story that is really, there's an incident in my life. It's not quite the same, but it's a very close incident where I felt as an 11-year-old that my life was truly in danger. And in that moment, you're having to make life and death decisions. And I never understood how much that very moment, those decisions affected me later in life. And so, just for the essence of time, because guess what? We're going to have you back on, Joe. You're going to have to come back on the show, Joe, because there's so much to you that, I just am beginning to open up and uncover. So I want to ask you this, just in case, somebody has to move off early or get off early or whatever. I want to ask you this, Joe, how did you see this affect you in your life, and where? Because I'm on chapter 20, guys. I haven't gotten all the way through. So I want to ask Joe, where was the point where you stepped into healing? How are you the Joe Potosi that you are today? A light man, a caring man, vulnerable, willing to be open and vulnerable. So there's a lot of questions here. How did you step into healing? How did you see this affect you before you got to healing? And then give us how you came inspired to write this book.
Okay.
For us. Give us this gift.
Okay. So I joined the military, and I was in delayed entry for about a year. And up until the time when I went into the military, I heard that refrain every day: "You're never going to make it in boot camp." By this point, we had left my stepfather.
Thank God.
Things with my mother were so awful. I actually asked my stepdad if I can live with him. If you can.
Wow.
His own kids didn't live with him, but I was so afraid for my life. But anyway, in my adolescent years, there was girls I like Michelle. But what played in the back of my mind is maybe I am a moron. Maybe I am dumb. Maybe I am ugly or a piece of garbage like they tell me. And these girls are going to think the same thing. So what's the point?
What's the point?
So I go into the military with that in my head, like my mother saying, "You're never going to make it in boot camp. And just remember one thing, you can never come back here to live. I'm done with you. You're a loser."
Wow.
So I go into the military. I had no real life skills. The way I dealt with conflict is with my hands, because that's what I saw my stepdad do. I didn't try to talk things out with other people. I would fight somebody on the drop of a hat, because little did I know I was carrying around all this baggage. I mean, listen, I found forgiveness from my father, and I had peace with my father. That was resolved. And because I love my mother, I guess by default, I forgave her. It kind of goes hand in hand, right? That's what I thought.
Yeah.
But when I got into real life, I realized that I was carrying around so much hurt, so much pain. And they were both, my mom and stepdad, were renting space in my mind. And it was affecting me. And it was manifesting itself through my poor choices in relationships. I turned to alcohol because I discovered alcohol would take the pain away, at least for a little while.
That's right.
And that pattern became extremely destructive. I got out of the Navy with an honorable discharge. I bought a house, bought a car, had a good job. But due to drinking and my mental health at that point in my life, I lost everything.
Sound familiar, guys? Sounds familiar, warriors, right?
I became homeless. And I decided that I broke up with my girlfriend. I lost my job. I decided I needed a new scenery, a new place. So my father, believe it or not, he was back in my life, but he was still drinking, whatever. He says, "Why don't you go to Dubuque, Iowa?" I took his advice. Everybody else said, "There's no jobs in Dubuque. Dubuque is not the right place." I took my
People will
father's
kill
advice.
your dreams. People will kill your dreams. Y'all understand? People will kill your dreams.
Exactly. I took my dad's advice. I met my present wife. Um, we got married in 1996. But at this point in my life, I was still drinking. We were both still drinking 3 to 4 times a week. We played league darts, and I guess that was an excuse. And I
Yeah.
still was carrying around all this hurt and resentment. My mother would come to town, and I would buy her affection. I would roll out the red carpet, but it was never, ever, ever
Good enough.
good enough. Never. So in 1997, I go to church, and I hear the gospel message for the probably millionth time, but this was different. I was ready to listen, and I was ready to trust. And once I did that, my life changed dramatically. I got involved with ministry. So from 1997 to today, I've been involved with Christian ministry. In 1998, my wife became pregnant. Now, this is the strange part, Lana, and a lot of rape victims have had the same experience. I was never raped. I was never molested, but I would have dreams and nightmares of what I went through as a child. And um, I never wanted to have kids, right? Because of what I went through as a child.
Afraid that you would repeat. Sometimes
Exactly.
afraid that you would repeat.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so I would have these dreams and nightmares, and I would cry to my wife. I mean, I know that sounds pathetic, but she's a
No.
mental health nurse, and she has training and whatever.
Real.
And then I believe it was God, not an audible voice, but He was saying, "I have forgiven you. Who are you not to forgive?" One particular day, I just consciously made the decision to forgive my mother and my stepfather in spite of them. They didn't come to me and saying, "Hey, man, I'm sorry. I'm sorry
Right.
for everything I put you through. I'm sorry for the torment. I'm sorry for homelessness. I'm sorry for locking you in the basement and beating you like an animal or whatever." No, that never happened. But guess what? Once I found that forgiveness, it set me free. It set me free.
That's right.
And, you know, I was sharing this with you earlier, and I get kind of emotional. I want to explain something to you and to your listeners. And maybe you've heard this before, maybe you haven't. But I'm going to tell you, I'm going to put it to you this way. Your condition does not have to be your conclusion.
That's so good. That's
I
so
have,
good.
I have 2 sons today, and they don't know what it's like to be homeless. They don't know what it's like to go hungry. They don't know what it's like to be walking on eggshells, afraid of being beaten for looking at me the wrong way or for, doing something I didn't like. They don't know any of that. I've broken that cycle. So just because I went through that as a child does not give me the permission to carry on that cycle. My mother, my father, my stepfather all had traumatic childhoods, and that's unfortunate. I feel bad about that, but that's not an excuse. That is
Right.
not an excuse.
Right.
Period.
Right.
And
Right.
I guess I gravitate toward. I have maybe a sixth sense. Like when I work with children or even like college age students, I can sense when they're troubled. There's something going on in their lives, and they're not opening up about it. And instead of trying to get it out of them, you just try to love on them and encourage them and mentor them and be the positive light in which they need. These
Yeah.
college students, they're there for an education, but they're lost. Many of them are lost from broken
Yeah.
homes. And, I want to say this real quick. I wasn't going to mention this, Lana, but I think it's paramount,
Move
especially
with
with
it.
what's going on in our country today.
Move
We
with
can
it.
sit and talk all night about the troubles we face as a country, all the stuff going on in Minneapolis, and Portland, Oregon, and Los Angeles, Chicago. But I'm going to tell you why our country is so bad. Our country is so bad because we have states in our country that are so bad. And in those states, there's counties. And in the counties, there's cities and villages and townships. On the side of those cities and towns and villages, there's neighborhoods. Inside those neighborhoods, there's households with single parent families, no fathers around, no structure, no nothing, no guidance, no leadership, no nothing. And we as a people can make a difference.
Well, yes, we can.
I volunteered in the jails. I had a television ministry for 12 years. I would work with people that are lesser than desirable, that society looks down on. Listen, man,
Absolutely.
just because you broke the law, maybe you got a DUI or assault and battery, that doesn't make you a leper, so to speak, or that doesn't make you, you know, an outcast. No,
No.
pay your dues, pay your fines. But listen, God never, God never casted me away. God never gave up on me, and I don't give up on people.
Thank you. Amen to that. That's so good. So grateful for that because you're so right. And you, just like you said, we can all make a difference right where you are, whether it is through a platform like this, whether it's one college student, whether it's one kid, whether it's one other person in recovery, whether it's at a bus stop, whether it's in Walmart, wherever it is. I need people to really, really hear that vulnerability is our key to healing. And in order to heal us as a society, we got to come together and realize we're all fighting these internal battles. And so many of the people that are violent today have done just like some of the things we grew up with, Joe. That's what they saw, it's what they know. And as we come in and meet violence with nonviolence, meet hate with love. I receive hate all the time. And my instinct is to bring it back, with hate. But I realize that's not changing anything. And I'm a change agent. You're a change agent. Every person in recovery is a change agent. You are a thought leader. You have to take these deep hurts, these places where you've taken the beliefs that have been input into you, those old programs, and break them where they are. Because I'm ashamed that, and I shared this with you tonight before we came on camera. I love the story that your sons don't know that abuse. And for me, I had to admit my moment was seeing that my son was beginning to experience some of the same things that I experienced. And I realized it was through me. And I realized that it was up to me right then to break the cycle. And to break
Awesome.
that cycle, I had to take those steps, Joe. I had to forgive. I didn't have to get the apology. I had to forgive. I had to clear that space in my head. I had to surrender. I had to call on a higher power. I had to reach out and build a relationship with trust in that manner. And then I really had to start dealing with and taking responsibility for the areas that I had repeated these cycles. And I had to be the kind of dad that walked into my son's room after one of those incidences and said, "Man, I am sorry. And here's the thing, I'm working right now as hard as I can to fix this behavior. Here's where it comes from. And here's what I don't want to happen. And so I need for you to now grow up and have your kids and don't ever, ever repeat any of this at all." And I want people to hear this story tonight, Joe. Through it all, you're a beautiful man, man.
Thank you, man. You asked me before what brought me to writing the book. Um, I need to say that when my kids were quite young, I was still working through some things, right? With my thinking, stinking
Yeah.
thinking, I call it.
That's the thinking, y'all. The
Yep.
thinking.
Yep. So I started a journal, and my wife has read 1,000 books, no exaggeration. She loves to read. And I would journal stuff and stories that I shared tonight, like with the gun and the zipper, stuff like that. And writing it down, it was like a cleansing process. But then I would read it to my wife to ask her if it makes sense or does she get where I'm coming from, whatever. And at this point, writing the book was the furthest thing from my mind. And I would share these stories with her, but this is how God works, I believe. When I would read the stories to her out loud, And I'll get to those stories about my stepdad throwing my mother in my bed and telling me to screw her.
Yeah, that was a hard part.
And of course, I'm pretending like I'm dead. That was a pattern that I struggled with for a lot of years. How sick that was, how insane. But when I would share those stories by reading out loud, it's like I hit a brick wall, and I would start crying like a baby because the realization hit me. But that's when the light came on. This is healing.
Yes.
This is release. This is
Yes.
letting it go.
Yes.
And at a point in time, my wife, who's a mental health nurse, and I mentioned that before, she said, "You know what? You should really write a book. You can help so many people." And my mentality has been, if that book helps one person, it served its purpose. And I can tell you, it's helped me immensely.
Yeah.
It's taken a lot of courage, and but my resolve, it's like throughout my whole life, I fall down 9 times, I get up 10. I don't quit. I never give up. And I want to tell your audience, I need to tell you this. In my book, I talk about a time where I contemplated taking my own life. And God intervened again. And he said, you need to be there for your sister and brothers. And from that point on, for the rest of my life, never had a thought like that again. And in spite of the ill treatment, they could not kill my spirit.
That's it.
I was there for my siblings, man, period.
Yes, you were.
And that was my
Yes,
drive.
you were. Yes, you were, man. And I just want to encourage every single person, whether you're watching this live, whether you catch this later, whether you catch this a year from now, when it comes up in our memory on Facebook, wherever you are, find that drive. Find that, I called it in the early days of my recovery, that one thing. Find that one thing that is going to keep you walking that path every moment, regardless of what it is. In recovery, yes, I know you've got to recover for yourself, but until you can love yourself enough, find something. For me, I had to get up for my son. I had to get up every day. He did not have an example in his life of the get up, go to work, do what you have to do, provide for your family. He didn't have that. That's what he needed. He needed to see somebody have a messed up start, have an amazing ending, and how to grow in the midst of that. And I had to get clean. And that was the thing that got me. And through that healing, and through my steady healing today, becoming who I authentically am, loving myself, loving my family, being there for my family, it keeps me going. And that kept me going. I love myself now, but it wasn't always like that. And I know that it probably wasn't always like that for you either, Joe, but you were there for your family. And this book tells that. And I read, it starts out with it being Marty, it's Marty that opened the book up, right? Because he's the one that wrote the
Forward.
the forward.
Yes.
And even, Marty's words. So you and your sister raised an amazing family. I mean, because Marty's words were so heartfelt. And I can tell that Marty has a very open, vulnerable spirit, just like you. Whether it is, whether he talks a lot, whether he shares it everywhere, or what, he shared it there. And it said a lot about your character. So I want to urge everybody again, head to Amazon, go to joepotosi.com, get a hold of Joe's book, find out what you can do today, get inspired. Don't be ashamed of 1 second of your story. It is all for a purpose if you decide to turn that pain into purpose. Joe, thank you for turning your pain into purpose, man. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And if I can just piggyback off what you said before
Come on.
about love and
Yes.
pain and the purpose, I want to just hit on this again for those people that are listening. There's people out there that have been through so much, and they're at they're at the point where they want to take their own lives. They feel like they're worthless, they have no value or significance. I want to tell you, you have a value that's unmeasurable. Don't believe the lie you've been told your whole life that you're nothing, you're never going to be nothing. God has a plan and a purpose for each and every one of us. I don't know what that is for you, but please just stop what you're doing and just contemplate where God wants to take you, okay? Because how sad it is that there's so many people that in their lives because they've been in situations like me and you, Lana, and no one is coming to their lives to put out a helping hand, or people don't understand. If you know somebody that's struggling, be that sounding board. Let them open up to you. They trust you and they really need professional help, but they need to start somewhere. Be that person, that ally that, encompasses them so that they can, become all they can be.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. I see in so many lives, in so many transformation stories, that it's been belief. There's a belief in there somewhere, whether a moment has you believe in yourself, even if it's just this much, take it and run with it. And just remember what I talk about a lot, and I'm sure Joe will agree, that many times we look for answered prayer in a box with a bow, in a nice rainbow and unicorn situation. Oh, this is going to feel so good. And so many times the answer to prayer comes in that last moment where you cannot take it anymore and you make the decision to walk out. Understand that if you're sitting in a place today that brings you to the decision, I'm done with this, I'm walking out of this situation, there is the answer to the prayer you've been praying for God to help you get out. If you take the step, then the steps will be shown at one step at a time, but you've got to move. If you don't move through that fear, you may miss it. And it would be a shame for you to miss the beauty that you are and all that just your story can do for the human race. We're not just affecting people here tonight. This is affecting humans everywhere. It's what the butterfly effect, and it's the drop the stone and the ripple effect. Each one, teach one, each one, love one, each one, move it out, and our nation will heal. It will heal.
Yes, that's awesome, man.
Joe, you're a huge part of that, man. You're a huge part of that. And I love you, man. That comes from my heart. I'm grateful once again that God has just sent me another amazing friendship to cultivate. You've made a huge impact here. Tell us once again where we can get the book. How can we get in touch with you? Let us know about it.
Okay. So this is the book right here, When the Dust Settled, Between a Rock and a Hard Place. You can find the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Xulon Press, Xulon. Also, I have a website where you can find the links to the book, joepotosi.com. You can also find me on Instagram, Joe_Potosi. I'm on Twitter and Facebook, obviously. And I love to have dialogue with you guys. And just remember, nothing is so bad that we have to just stop trying or just give up on our dreams, give up on our hopes and our aspirations. Lana, I used to have this conception once I became a Christian that I'm immune from cancer. I'm immune from being laid off from my job. I'm immune from hardships. But guess what? I've had more hardships and more setbacks in my life after I became a Christian. But guess what? I have never been alone. God promises us I'll be a father to the fatherless and a mother to the motherless. He won't leave us nor forsake us. And even though we feel alone, when we have that relationship, we have that ally, we're not forsaken, you know.
Never.
And listen, man, just real quick, Lana, I work at the YMCA, YWCA part time in youth sports. I also volunteer at the Y coaching basketball, 8, 9 year olds. And I do that because I want to make a difference. And a lot of these kids are wayward children. And years ago, maybe 10 years ago, I coached football. I was a defensive coordinator for 3 years. These kids are now in college. And last summer, I ran into 2 or 3 of them. And you know what they said to me? We all laughed about how much we lost and, but how much fun we had. And each of those guys told me in their own way at different times, this basically, thank you for teaching me about life.
Wow.
Thank you for being committed to my growth and for just teaching me not just about football, but what it means to be a man and what it means to be a good person and what it means to work hard.
Yeah.
And that was so impactful for me.
Yes.
I shared this with Lana before we started about the relationship I have with my kids. And this might sound cheesy, but it's reality, okay? We might have an event at my in-laws, right? And maybe my kids are already there, and my brother-in-laws and my wife. I might be the last one to show up. When I get to the house, people greet me or whatever, but the first people I go to are my sons. And they embrace me in the hug, and they'll say, I love you, Dada. They call me Dada. And that is so powerful, man.
It is. It is. That show of love through young guys, that's breaking that machismo, don't be vulnerable mode, man. And that's big in life. Like I said, we don't know how far these things really go. Part of the reason it's so easy to pull a trigger these days is because we don't have that connection, because we teach our young men not to be vulnerable, that your toughness is measured in your ability to be violent and your ability to hide your emotions. And there is just so much of that programming that for you to have 3 young men in the world who are not afraid to show their emotions, who embrace their father, who has done so much that they'll never even fully understand how much of a sacrifice and how much healing you went through to give them this new life in 2 generations, even less. They will not know. Your bloodline will not ever have known poverty, abuse, addiction. They won't know. That's because of you. That's because of all of you. When you change that cycle and you break it, regardless of age of your kids, regardless of your age or where you are, don't ever think that you're too old or they're too old or you'll never make a difference. No, don't listen to that lie. You can make a difference today and just continue to do that. So maybe we'll have a couple generations, man, that won't live in the same ways that we live now, where they will be able to be vulnerable, where they will show affection. That's amazing, Joe. I don't even know that you realize how amazing that truly is.
Speaking of amazing, I've watched some of your shows, and there's something about you. I kind of have gravitated toward your shows, and I'm like, wow.
Thanks, Joe.
He's not taking nothing from anybody else that's doing the same thing, but you're kind of not a renegade, but just kind of you're on a different page. You know what I'm saying? And what you share is relevant, and it's something we need to hear today.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you, man.
Thank you, Joe, so much. That means so much to me, man. It really, really does, because I do step out on a limb to share some of the things that I share, because because it goes against our old paradigms of recovery. But those old paradigms of recovery were not what healed me, and it was breaking those old paradigms. And I get so excited when I really use something in my life and discover something and put it into use. I've tested and tried every tool that I put out in the world, and I know that it works, and I stand behind it. And I had to go in that different direction. And because I was the same person, I didn't believe in me. I believed what I was told. I was fat. I was weird. I was ugly. I was, I didn't belong, not belonging to a family. That's another thing. Not belonging to a family gives you, this whole outsider complex, and the secrets and the shame and the abuse and all those things. I really believed that, I was just here to be tortured in this life. So what people sometimes don't understand is they didn't see that part of me, but that was who I was. And so the things that I share, I step out on a limb for, and I take some hits for, but I'll continue to share these things because they really have changed my life. And I'm just like you. If that can change a life of one person through saying these things and letting them know that they work and it's real and you can break these cycles, it's all worth it to me. And I'll take the hits. I'm like you, Joe. I'm used to taking the hits. I had a kid sister. I did what I had to do to stand in the gap for her. So I can take hits, and I'll take hits for every one of you, as long as every one of you know that you're changeable, you're special, and that you can awaken the giant that is within you right now, today. And
Absolutely.
You can change that stinking thinking.
Absolutely.
Well, Joe, man, this has been an absolute pleasure for me, a treat for me. I see these comments. I could listen all night. Bobby Lynn Lewis says, Livy Jameson, thank you for your beautiful message, Joe. I mean, there is so much. Sarah Jane says, thank you so much, Joe and Lona. I appreciate your time for sharing some of yourself with us, and can continue to do what you're doing. You're helping us. Man, there have been really, 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 we get to be the voice for the voiceless today. I will not be anonymous, Sarah Jane says. People are waking up, Joe. It's worth it, what we're doing, man. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Please agree to come back. And Joe is in the process of writing book number 2 right now, guys. So get the book, When the Dust Settled, but Caught Between a Rock and a Hard Place by Joe Potosi, joepotosi.com. Guys, go and get it because you want to get caught up, because book number 2, man, it's fixing to blow off, man. The whole top's fixing to blow off the earth with this, man. I love you, dude.
I love you guys, man. I know I don't know you guys, but I still love you.
I feel that, man. We feel that.
And listen, remember, if you don't remember anything else, remember this. Your condition does not have to be your conclusion.
Your condition does not have to be your conclusion, period, man.
I'll just say this real quick. I had back surgery July 8th, and it was something I was dreading for a long time. I hurt my back in 91. And over the last couple of years, I was getting injections. I'm like, I don't want surgery. I don't want surgery. The injections stopped working. I was afraid of having surgery. But guess what? I could have stayed on the pity pot, and I could have, wallowed in the mud, so to speak. Woe always me. Or I could lace up my boots, pick myself up, do what I have to do in order to get back to being the man I was. And guess what? I'm going back to work Wednesday.
Come on.
Way ahead of time.
Come on. Good stuff, man.
I refuse to give in to, the easy way out,
That's what it is. It's the easy way. Sometimes we think when we get clean, everything is supposed to be good, and so many times that belief system will contribute to relapse. It did for me for so long because I had the wrong belief about recovery. I thought that if I got clean and sober, everything would be good. Uh-oh, we lost Joe. I hope he comes back. But either way, what we got to know, man, is that It doesn't mean that. Like, it doesn't mean that. Like, recovery doesn't mean life is going to stop happening. What it means is we grow through the pain. We don't just go through it anymore for the sake of going through. We grow through for the sake of becoming all we were destined to become. Every one of you have the talent within to awaken all that you are on the inside of you, everything you were divinely designed to be. And I don't care what you call your, I guess we lost Joe for good. I don't care what you call your belief system. I don't care what label you put upon it. Remember, labels limit. Anything we label cannot be more than the definition of the label. So be careful labeling things, and don't fight for labels, guys. Don't get in heated arguments with people over the definitions of your labels. That's what we're fighting right now. Our whole country is fighting the definitions and labels they've put upon things, and we fight the labels we've put upon ourselves. I want you today to commit to breaking those labels, just like Joe, just like myself, just like many of you out there. You've broken those labels of moron. You've broken those labels. We got Joe back. You've broken those labels that were placed upon you in times where you had no say. So kick down the boxes of those labels and decide that you're going to be all that you were designed to be. Make that decision. Know that you're going to discover it and start stepping towards it. Joe, man, thank you again. I could thank you all night. Reading your book has been so healing for me. It has been so eye-opening for me to be able to look in and see, hey, man, this guy went through a lot of the same things. Some of the details are different, but the themes are a lot alike. We've experienced some of the same things. You've made it out. You're raising a beautiful family. You're a husband. You're a father. You have an amazing personality and heart and transparency. You've written an amazing book. You are absolutely an inspiration to me. I know you've been such an amazing inspiration to this audience here. And for years to come, as this video continues to move out, because the internet is forever, you're going to be inspiring people for years and years and years to come just with this story. So thank you. Thank you, sir.
I can never thank you so much, man, for everything you do. I said that before. And I know maybe you feel like sometimes, should I keep doing this? Maybe you feel like you're burned out, or what difference does it make anyway? I just want to encourage you to keep, fight the good fight, man.
Thank you.
You don't know who you are impacting. You don't know. You might not hear from people that you have reached and you've touched and you've changed their lives.
Thank you,
That's
man.
how it works.
That was divine.
So when you have those down times, and that goes for everybody, when you're having down times in your life and you're fighting a good fight, you're volunteering, you're helping a single mother with her children, you're taking her to the store, or you're helping her with babysitting or whatever, and you don't feel appreciated, or what difference does it make? I just want to encourage you not to give up, because you are making a difference. And Lana, really, really quick, when I was a young kid, when I would go to church and the Joy Bus, that was the name of the bus that would pick us up, Joy Bus Church. These people, most of them were volunteers. And I'm going to tell you something, they impacted me for the rest of my life. And I contribute that in part to why I am in the ministry and why I have been a volunteer for so many years, because of the bigger picture.
Yes. There's always a bigger picture. Sometimes back up from the problem and look around. Because if I get real close right here, man, it limits my vision. And sometimes it's just stepping back, man, and looking at it from a bigger picture. That's a great note. That's a great note, man, to end end on, man. And again, make sure to come back. We're going to be connected from this point forward. I already know. I mean, nobody gets away from me, so be careful coming on my show, because then you're just locked in with LC. So thank you, Joe. Again, guys, you guys know how to get in touch with Joe. You guys know how to go get that book. Go get it. Get it on Kindle right now when we get off, man. It's a great read. It's going to keep you in. It's going to keep you from the first page. It's going to keep you from Marty's introduction, from Marty's forward. You're going to be absolutely hooked. So I encourage you guys to do it. Joe, man, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, brother. I'm so grateful to know you. I can't wait to see how the book ends up. You've given me some snapshots now. I'm starting to get even more excited. We're almost rid of Tyrone. I'm so grateful. I just can't wait to see. So good luck on writing book 2. Let's stay in touch with one another. Man, all of you out there, I just pray that you have gotten your hearts filled, your souls nourished tonight. And I pray that you carry that out into your worlds where you are. I love you guys. Joe, I love you. And we'll see you next time, man. And y'all join me Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays. Right now, we're doing it at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here, Lona Curry, Facebook.com, and the Recovery Soul Food YouTube channel. If you're not a subscriber yet, please like, subscribe, and share our channel. Let's help Joe get the message out for When the Dust Settled, and let's keep making our recovery lights shine bright forever through this earth. Joe, I love you. Guys, I love you. And we will talk to you again soon.